without further ado, the Women in MedTech panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, so I had the pleasure of moderating the panel at the August event, and at the time when I was huddling with the ladies saying, you know, how do we want to orchestrate this, what do we want to focus on, the consensus at the time was, you know, we're really just people in medtech. You know, we wish we didn't have to have a topic of women in medtech, right? So we kind of kept it pretty neutral in terms of topics. However, since then, we've had Harvey Weinstein, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Me Too, you know, all in the news, women in the workplace, harassment, et cetera. So, you know, I think we're going to, you know, touch on that a little bit today just because it's relevant to the times. But we'll get into some other great stuff based on the women's experience and leadership. So I'm going to let them introduce each other, or introduce themselves, rather. I think these are on. Are these on? Here we go.
I'm Rebecca McMillan. I've been in the pharmaceutical and medical device development business for more than 30 years. I started out with a Japanese pharmaceutical company, went to a CRO, spent a lot of time there, learned a lot. Then I went to work for Allergan, and was up in Santa Barbara at Allergan Medical, so we did medical device there. And with the big upheaval at Allergan, I had the opportunity to go back to INC, which is now Syneos Health, and lead up from a clinical perspective, the medical device group at Syneos Health. And I'm based here in Irvine, but I split my time in New Orleans, Louisiana. So,
Very nice, thank you.
Notice how we're all sharing this mic. No offense. Hi, I'm Kim Walpole. I am co-founder and CEO of Trials AI. We're leveraging artificial intelligence to accelerate clinical trials. So we're here to help you. It's a good thing. So a little bit about my background. I spent 12 years on the organizational development side working with tier 1 pharmaceutical companies to improve their human capital. And then my best friend got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, which completely changed my whole world. Essentially, he reached out and he said, look, I know you've got friends, you know, at Columbia, at Dana-Farber. I've been given 5 months to live. There's no cure. Can you get me into a clinical trial? And at that point, I thought, of course, you know, I've got friends, sometimes in high places. And so started reaching out to those friends, and they said, look, there are a couple of drugs that are looking promising, but by the time we actually get them into a clinical trial, he'll be gone. And unfortunately, true to their word, he ended up dying several months later. And what that did for me was kind of lit this fire in me to start asking questions around why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we okay with systems and practices that, gosh, haven't changed maybe over the last 40 years when we've seen so many advancements in medicine and, you know, in the healthcare space? Why do we accept in healthcare what we wouldn't accept in any other vertical? So that was kind of the impetus behind Trials AI and where we're at today. Really exciting space to be in, and we love to see and partner with you know, device companies that are doing really cool things in the space.
Hi everyone, excuse me, sorry. I'm Catherine Zavala. I'm the program director at MedTech Innovator. And so rather than talk about me, I'll just give a little intro about my company. So MedTech Innovator is an accelerator and competition for early stage medical device companies. Medical device, diagnostic, and digital health. And so where we're differentiated from other accelerators in our space is that we're very driven by the industry. So we have about 10 sponsors that are manufacturers in this space. So Johnson & Johnson, BD, Baxter, Olympus, Amgen, and a few others. And they're very heavily involved in our program. They help us select the companies that we're going to accelerate, and then also they mentor the companies that we work with. And then the other part of it is the competition aspect. So we award about $500,000 throughout our annual program. And just a little plug, we're currently recruiting companies for this year's cycle. So any of those medtech companies out there, please feel free to apply. Our deadline, well, for this audience will be February 16th.
Hi, I'm also. I think it was the lunch. I'm Stacy Deppner. I'm the Director of Engineering at Nectar Product Development. We're a full-service product development company. We do research, user experience, industrial design, mechanical and electrical engineering, and we bring products all the way into manufacturing. My background is in medical devices. I've been working in med for, I think, 16 years, 15 or 16 years. I started out at Boston Scientific in engineering and moved over to EV3, which is in Minnesota, but I would come out here to Irvine once in a while and help out. And then I moved into a role that was helping to implement our strategic management system, and went out on my own after that to implement that system in other companies before moving out here to California and deciding I didn't want to travel anymore because I'm where I want to be and where it's warm. So I looked for a product development firm and found Nectar and have been there for 3 years now. So having a lot of fun there.
Excellent. Thank you, ladies. So I'd like to start off the top the issue of sort of women in the workplace harassment. I mean, obviously these things have been in the news for the last several months. I think it's got HR people at attention, et cetera. And I just wanted to ask the panel, from your perspective as women in med tech, has this news and sort of a new lack of tolerance, I guess, for harassment, has this affected your workplace, or do you have a particular perspective on why this is happening? What your perspective is on where we need to go? You want to go?
So workplace, I think, it's no surprise to any of us that these things are coming to light, right? It's kind of like the little, the big elephant in the closet. But the reality is that for me, I guess workplace is probably a little different since I am the CEO and I have, firing power. So in that case, probably not so much. But the reality is that, I'm out there fundraising. And so a lot of the conversations that we're having and a lot of the things that have come to light, I don't think are any great surprise to those that are out there raising capital and things like that and having discussions with, men. We're not talking about, all men, we're not on a men rampage. This isn't one of those feminist conversations. This is really just about how can we as women, how can we as a society make it, I don't want to say easier, but probably equal, in terms of the conversation, in terms of coming. And I've had my own Me Too experiences, and frankly, didn't want to post on social media about those Me Too experiences because I was like, well, what's that going to do? But in having quiet conversations with folks, both men and women alike, I hear really good things. I hear things like, we need change. We want to create an environment where it's safe for women, to work alongside their counterparts and not have to worry about some of these things. So I'm excited that the conversation is alive, that it is no longer the big elephant in the closet, but that it's, a conversation that's happening much more naturally than the way that it's happened previously. So I'm really grateful for it. Not for the problems.
I'd like to just say that things have gotten a lot better in the 30 years that I've been in the business. It used to be very common that there was colorful language and things said in the workplace, and the women, we didn't want to object because we didn't want to be caught out as, not playing along with everything. And I think that's a very difficult line to walk because some of the stuff was offensive. I never had any big issues, but I did not appreciate, the kind of language and the kind of discussions that went on. But I have to say, over the last 30 years, things have gotten a lot better. I think women, as women, we have higher expectations of the people we're working with. I think we're less likely to say, oh yeah, that was funny, huh? So I think I see progress. It's still there. I do a lot of work in the medical aesthetics business, and everyone must be beautiful. So I'm sure that has added to the burden of everybody, and the physicians that we work with, I mean, they have a perception of beauty. Like, they'll come up to you and say, oh, I could fix your nose there. And you think, really, I really don't want to be appreciated for my nose. I would really just like to do a good job. And I think I think we all should say that. And just be vigilant, I guess, and supportive.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm glad people are starting the conversation, and it's more of an open topic, and it's not becoming something that people are just kind of turning their noses up on or making jokes about. It seems the Me Too movement seemed to be taking fairly seriously. I know on Facebook I saw some guys joking a bit, but a lot of them were joining in and saying, you know what, I've experienced this through a woman, and I've had a friend who's been through this, and so it was really bringing the men out to have the discussion as well, which was exciting. The thing that I hope that it helps is taking action, because most people know of some incident that's happened to somebody at least, and what I've seen in the workplace years ago went on for quite a long time, and there was no action taken even though a lot of people spoke out. And so I'm hoping that we can reduce the time it takes and be able to have a more serious action taken with people. Because this person also didn't even have to leave the company. They were just moved to a special place in the company. And
The basement. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm hoping, like I said, that we can just take action more quickly and more seriously, and move people on.
Interesting. I kind of want to segue from that topic just to a related topic, I guess, a little bit in terms of prevalence of women in med tech. I was at a conference in December here in Irvine where the head of Medtronic Neurovascular, who's a female, talked about how they're trying to diversify their teams, particularly on the sales side. I don't have statistics on this, but it's pretty safe to bet that most salespeople in med tech, I would say, are men. And she is actually tasked from a leadership perspective to bring in more women to her group, and she's actually measured on it. And so what they do is they literally look for smart women, and even if they don't have experience in neurovascular per se, they'll bring these women in and train them to increase just the number of women in the organization. And I'd never heard of anything like that, and I thought it was pretty cool. Have you ladies heard of anything like this in the industry?
No, I mean, I haven't seen anything, like that, but I think, I thought that was very interesting, I guess, when we had our pre-call, when we talked about how the women CEOs that we see in our industry, and often they tend towards, or like in the past, they've tended towards being women's, in the women's health space. And I think that we are seeing a lot more women CEO that are branching out into other, areas, I guess, Kim included here. But I think that's great. And at MedTech Innovator, it's something that we're always cognizant of is, when a company has a woman CEO, we don't, there's no special treatment, but it's something that we always look to have balance in our portfolio. We always want to have equal representation, and seeing a woman CEO on the stage is always great for us.
Yeah, in fact, did anyone attend the MedTech meeting, AdvaMed's meeting in San Jose in the fall? So you may have seen they had the competition at the event, and I was very psyched because the company I voted for won. It's very exciting. But I was telling Catherine on the phone that it was interesting to me, even though the finalist CEOs, many were male, the judges, there were 3 female judges and 1 male, all from industry, and I thought that was really interesting too, and I was very happy to see that, so thank you.
Yeah, we were proud of that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hello. I think, just interestingly, I had the opportunity to have a very frank conversation with my boss when we were all leaving Allergan. They got rid of all the VPs in Irvine. They thought we were all tainted, which is fine. But it was an interesting opportunity to have an honest discussion, because from the CEO down to his top lieutenants, it was all male, no women. And I asked him, I said, would it make it uncomfortable in the meeting setting if there was 1 woman and the rest of you are all men? And he said, quite honestly, it would, because I can feel like I can talk to the guys. We all think the same, and it's just, we know what to expect from each other. He says, but then you get a woman in the mix, And I was really disappointed by that because as a boss, he had been fantastic. But, I mean, opportunity to be honest with me, I mean, he actually said that. And I think that is going to be, I think that's going to be a continuing struggle. And everybody perceives women as, well, they're just going to go get married and have babies, and then they're not really interested in their career. And that's not really true. A lot of women have successfully had families and risen to the top, so
You know what I have to say to that?
Yeah.
Most people are wrong about most things most of the time, right?
Oh, I like that.
You can go tell your boss that.
Can I quote you on that? That's a nice quote.
I got that from somebody. I don't know. Interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, so obviously we're a startup, so we don't have quotas around, although, you know, I'm not opposed to it. But I do think we were having a chat earlier around that. We're needing to scale quickly, and we're looking at certain skills. So I never look at, you know, whether it should be a woman that I'm hiring, or how do I make room at the table, because there's room at the table in our company for everybody. But for me, it's a skills, you know, question. Do you have the skills to help us get from point A to point B the fastest? And unfortunately, you know, again, conversation earlier, I was having a talk with one of my HR friends, and she was saying, you know, on the recruiting side, sometimes the language that women use is so different than the language that men use, that women will look at a, you know, job description and they'll want to be 95% there before they'll apply. Men often will, you know, be like, 42-ish% there. And they're like, but I'm looking good, you know, and today I'm feeling it. So 32 is good. So I think, you know, making room, and I jest, I'm really being facetious there, but I think making room at the table and lending opportunity for people to just come and have a conversation. You know, I've had folks say, well, I'm not sure that I would be a good fit. And a lot of times the conversation that we have with female potential employees is, you're thinking the way that we're thinking. I'm not looking for you to have that, like, you're coming to the table and you're like, I can take this company from X to, or maybe from A to Z, but I'm looking to make sure that you fit the culture and that you're thinking the way that we do. We can get you the rest of the way there as long as you know, have a learning mindset, as long as you're thinking along the same lines. So yeah, it's a lot harder for us to just go, this is going to be a role that a woman's going to fill. It could take us a long time, and we'd end up spending a lot of money. So, I don't know.
Stacey, I wanted to ask you, since you're in engineering, and I'm just going to make a gross assumption that it's a lot of men also. Can you talk about your experience being a woman in engineering in this field?
Yes, and I could probably talk for quite a while, but it's so there's about 10% women in mechanical engineering when I went to school, and I grew up with a lot of boys. I grew up in the country. I've even built my own car from the ground up. So from my perspective, I've been able to overcome a lot of barriers working with men simply because I can relate on a lot of levels. And that has gotten me in a lot of doors and broken down that feeling in the meeting rooms. Because I know a lot of men do feel like that. Like, you can't have the woman in the room, or you have to be careful what you say. But I've been able to break that down just by, you know, having the upfront conversations, getting people to know me on a personal level so that they understand it's not like they think they can overstep the bounds, but they're not so worried about stepping on the bounds. We can have a more relaxed conversation. And then just on the topic of hiring, so again, there's only 10% in engineering, so I haven't been in a company that has mandated having women in engineering, but I have never been at a company who has not had a good amount of women in engineering. So I haven't seen areas where they haven't hired. However, promoting is a different story. I have been at a company that very much was a boys' club, and it was very difficult to get in to the point where you were a woman that could be promoted up. They did hire some in some women in at higher levels that were already VPs or directors, but it was really hard to move up in the company. And I definitely saw the barrier there.
Interesting. All right, thanks. So I guess I'd like to shift gears a little bit and just kind of tap into your collective expertise and experience and talk about sort of trends that you think are coming in 2018. We talked a lot this morning about digital health and living forever, which I don't know, I still want my eggs, cheese, and wine, sorry. Yeah, that's cool. Just want to talk to you guys about, what you see as sort of in the future, how technology is kind of merging with the traditional med tech and sort of what you're seeing, Catherine, in terms of the companies that are approaching you or the technologies you're evaluating or working on, for example. Could you talk about sort of what you see as kind of the next trends?
You're probably good to start.
Yeah, so I do see a fair amount of companies, we get about 600 applications a year, so I do have a good perspective of the trends, and I would say, obviously one of the biggest ones is digital health. I think that's been brewing for quite some time now, but I think what's really going to change in the next couple of years is it's not going to be its own category in medtech anymore. We're seeing a lot of traditional medical devices that have some sort of digital component, and so I think it's not going to be digital health and traditional med device, it's just going to be health more generally. And then the other thing that we've seen a lot more is, this push towards consumer health care. So, a lot more where the user or the patient is taking an active role in their health, probably alluding to some of the earlier topics about what you should and shouldn't eat. But and then another thing, of course, the last big trend I think is machine learning. So again, something that's been below the surface for quite some time, but I think there's actual business models that have been formed around this that are very viable, and so we're going to see a lot more machine learning, and it's going to be useful machine learning, not people just using it as a buzzword to get investments.
Yeah, speaking of machine learning, that's a very exciting subject that we see a lot of companies come into us and they want a product developed, and it's a lot of, the big trend is the wearable diagnostic equipment. And we start talking to them about, what do you want to do with this data? We're going to be able to collect all this data on individuals, but now you can populate data sets across many individuals across the world. We can start understanding trends and building algorithms so that, and the machine learning is building the algorithms so that we can start to understand trends that point out problems and relating them to root causes. So I'm very excited to see where this is going to go. I think there's a lot of potential things that can go wrong along the way and scare people, because when we're collecting all that data, you first don't have enough to really make conclusions, yet you want to, because you're trying to sell your product. And then as we get to a peak, we'll probably have a great amount of data, and then when we get too much, now what do we do with all of that, and how do we sort out the chaff from the wheat? So I'm excited to see us progress, and I hope that we can stay on that peak and just make sure that we're keeping it optimum.
Are you seeing, it's interesting because I've been in business 11 years and then with other agencies previously, and it just seems like we work across ologies, and it seems like everybody's got a spin on deep learning and gathering data and all that, no matter what the device is. Is that what you're seeing as well?
So I think our clients aren't coming to us knowing that they want it, but we talk to them about it and show them where their product can go in the future. So you've got the collection of data, and then there's also just being able to now write algorithms using machine learning. I think that's a big step. Instead of paying somebody to figure out the algorithm, collecting the data and allowing the system to understand the trends itself. That's where it'll go next.
Go ahead.
So it's interesting talking about AI, I think, in this context, because when we first started talking about AI a few years ago, AI in medicine, I literally had people look at me and say, "You're out of your mind. That's not going to happen, not in medicine. AI, robots," and we're like, No, this is a data conversation, but we'll talk about that later. And what's interesting, the other day, well, we were at JPM a few weeks ago, and somebody said, "Oh, you hit it, at the right time. You guys came in just at the right time." And I'm like, 3 years later is the right time. It's like the Twitter talk about, they're an overnight success, and it was like 7 years later, they're an overnight success, right, that conversation. But I really do think that there's a lot of use cases. We've got, TensorFlow now readily available. Like there's a lot of readily available open sourced, information that we can use and algorithms and things like that. And so I see that we're really going to start moving more and more in that direction. I think it's much more readily available. I think the data's there, especially in healthcare. I'm constantly going, there's all of this dark data, at all of these different organizations, and how can we use it? How can we leverage this historic data to make predictions around, successes and things like that for future? So I think there's that. And then I was hearing all kinds of things about the blockchain. I will not give you any, quick and dirty info on the blockchain, but when we're talking about, trends and where things are going, something's going to happen on the blockchain. You heard it here, that's the conversation. But I'm curious to hear about, the direction that we're going to head in that vein.
Oh, interesting. So I don't know, how many of you this question's gonna be relevant for, but one thing I think about with medical innovation. My husband read Ray Kurzweil's The Singularity is Near book years ago, and he was saying, "Oh, it's going to be amazing. We're going to have these bots that go in our bloodstream and they fix everything." And and I was like, "Honey, there's the FDA." And I'm just curious if they've, if in your product development or in developing your services, if you've sort of understand sort of where the FDA is with all of this stuff, because things are moving so quickly. How can the reviewers really know what they're looking at? How do they keep up, kind of thing? Do you have any perspective on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. So we've worked with a company that has cabinets that lock out narcotics, and they're constantly watching the trends of the regulations because they're trying to look ahead from a strategic standpoint, where the whole industry is going, what does the industry need? But at the same time, the regulatory bodies are holding that industry back from becoming more efficient and getting them to the point that they need to, which is protecting the product, the current product that the company has. However, again, you're constantly having to watch both sides and know where it's going.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So in my program, we've worked with Bakul Patel at the FDA, and so we know that he has, started this pre-cert program, and so some of, our companies have put some input into what kind of regulatory strategies there are for digital health companies. And I think what I'm seeing is that they're very open to dialogue. They want to hear from startups and small companies and big companies and want to understand, how a product is developed, and they're not trying to get in the way. They just want to make sure that things are safe, but they also understand that by putting, an unnecessary burden, it's stifling innovation in the industry, and it's making it difficult to get investment if you have these large regulatory hurdles to get through. And so I'm encouraged. I think that they're doing the right thing, and I think we'll see a really great program come out of this.
Oh, that's great.
Wait a moment here. So there's so much innovative technology out there, and I get to see a lot of it, and I get to work with the FDA on it, and they want to be able to help. They really want to understand what it is, but there's so much information that I think they're overwhelmed. I mean, they want to fast track stuff, and the truth is, but they don't really understand it, but we have to have the right mindset to say, look, we need to make sure within ourselves that the stuff we're putting out there is safe, because I think that's what has gotten the pharmaceutical industry, is they've put things out there that weren't safe, and the FDA is like, okay, I'm just going to take you 10 years longer now. Mm-hmm. So, I'm just really hoping they can live up to their accelerated timeline. And I think the jury is still out on that. I don't think anyone went to work today because the federal government was closed. But, you know, that's something I think that's important that they need to continue to push for. We need to continue to push for, because letting new technology languish, waiting for the FDA to do something is a waste of life. You know, waiting for the pancreatic cancer cure is a waste of life.
Absolutely. I can echo, I think, the same that everyone else has been saying up here. When we first started developing our product, everyone was like, the FDA was like the boogeyman, you know, this big bad, they're going to try and stop you kind of conversation. So I reached out to the FDA, got right to Janet Woodcock, and had a really deep conversation around, this is where we're going. We're not trying to digitize a really crummy process. No offense. We actually want to change the way that we run clinical trials. This is what we're thinking. And interestingly enough, they were like, yeah, yes, you're actually making life easier for us, making life easier for the patients, minimizing patient burden, you know, making it easier for sponsors and, you know, providing transparencies, lowering the barrier to entry to a lot of the med device companies that may have to raise, you know, traditionally would have to raise $5-10 million to run early studies, you know, can do it much cheaper and much faster using our technology. So they have been all along the process just really excited about what we're doing. Sometimes they do ask questions, you know, sometimes they're like, can you give us, you know, a waterfall, you know, kind of, and we're like, how about an agile methodology? And they're like, yeah, we're with you. So just having the conversation and opening up the conversation, I think, has changed everything for us. You know, I know that others haven't, you know, have waited. So maybe the cautionary tale is don't wait. Get them involved really early and allow them to be part of the process alongside you instead of, you know, trying to retrofit that.
And I know for entrepreneurs that come to us, the FDA is a scary thing. So we had one client in particular that we've been working with who looked at it, and we were helping them understand, how can we develop and get a product on the market that's first considered a wellness device, so it doesn't need the full FDA approval? And so we scaled back the product and didn't take it all the way to the point where it was fully diagnosing something, but it brought in the data and was able to give it to a doctor, give the doctor the tools that they needed to quickly identify any problems they might have, and we're able to work on that again under less FDA regulation than if we were to go to full certification.
I'll just add one more thing. So just another example of the extent that they're going to engage in dialogue. So they FDA has this experiential learning program where they do site visits, and so they'll actually be part of MedTech Innovator Summit this year. So they're going to send 6 reviewers, and you know, the point of this program is for them to hear from the startups themselves, you know, about what kind of trials they're going through as they develop their product, and how the regulatory landscape affects their timelines. And so I think it's really great. And I think, you know, for anyone who's developing a product out there, I would just say the FDA is not scary. They're very approachable.
What a difference a few years makes, right? That's good. That's great to hear. We've got about 7 more minutes. I wanted to touch on another topic, and that is cost, because that's a big driver of where medtech is going as well, because it's not good enough to iterate anymore. We'll have to meet the triple aim and improve outcomes, reduce cost, and improve the patient experience. And you kind of have to have that to even go to CMS, or we heard the payer conversation this morning. How are you guys seeing? How are you helping your clients, or in some cases your portfolio companies or your sponsors or whatnot? How are you kind of helping them achieve cutting the cost curve?
Okay, I guess I'll start. So one thing that we've done, so AvaMed, the Medical Trade Association, Medical Industry Trade Association, is a big partner of ours. And last year they partnered with Deloitte to release a couple of papers, white papers. One of them was they're both about value proposition. So developing a value proposition for either your medical device or your diagnostic. And we've really incorporated that in our program, even as far as bringing on a woman from UCLA who ran their procurement program. And so what we're doing for our companies is really teaching them how to shape their value proposition to attract their customer, whether it be a payer or a provider or a patient or anyone along that, any of those stakeholders. And we're teaching them that, when you come in, it's not about coming in and saying, we're going to make physicians a lot of money. That's not attractive anymore, at least unless you're talking to an angel investor group of physicians. But for everyone else, they're really looking at that triple aim that you mentioned, and that goes from your institutional investors to your potential acquirers. Anyone along that spectrum has really adopted this idea that it's about outcomes and not this fee-based schedule that we were used to in the past.
I think that's a hard thing. I've done a lot of that lately, talking to some of the people and letting them know that if their product really doesn't differentiate itself in the marketplace, you're wasting your money going, to all these different regions, hoping that your Me Too is going to convince somebody, because it's not. And, do they always believe me? No. I mean, some people, they believe in their product, and there's a certain heartfelt, they love their product. It is their baby. And it's very difficult, but I think you have to be very cold and calculating on what you're going to, whether you're really, this is something that really is worth pursuing for the cost.
So for us, we don't deal with the payer, and we go directly to the sponsor. And what's really interesting for us that we've seen, I'll give you a use case. We had a device company that actually was wanting to run an early stage trial. They had gone to 3 different CROs, pricing anywhere from $750,000 up to $2.7 million to run their study. They came to us, they said, look, we've selected 10 different sites, we've got our own PI, we've got the regulatory, can we give you the protocol and manage this study ourselves using your platform? And we said, heck yes, we can. And so we worked with them, saved them about $500,000 in running their study, and they're really excited. They're actually wrapping up now, and their goal is to cure snoring. So we're super excited to be aligned with them.
That's great.
Okay, and I'll just go deep on the cost part. Different perspective altogether is the cost of the product, the cost to develop it, and the cost of the product itself is something we're constantly looking at from the very point our clients come to us. We have to always be thinking about that. I was sitting with someone at lunch telling me an example of a company that spent $2 million to find out that their product wasn't even feasible. And I said, wow, that's something that you have to be thinking about from day one. And it's something we manage for our clients. We're constantly predicting what the cost might be, even before we fully understand what the product is. It's important to be estimating the cost of goods and the potential, even labor, and what the product development cost might be, because you don't want that running away on you. That's something that will really make a client upset is going way over budget and having a product that can't even be sold. So it's something, if you're entrepreneurs, you need to be thinking about that upfront before you even get started.
Excellent. Thank you, ladies. So I'd like to just take the last couple of minutes to take any questions from the audience.
So I know this might be opening Pandora's box here, but it's great to have such a wonderful panel. I'd love to hear, I guess, maybe two-part question. One is, what can we, or even myself as a male or just in general, do better or be aware of in the workplace, kind of going back to the earlier part of the conversation? And then the second part is, I almost feel or sense there's like a push. I'm not saying that you guys are saying this, but almost like there's a sense of trying to make things homogenous. And so I guess my question is, where does the role of masculine and feminine still play a role in society? And that yin and yang, or that balance, not necessarily male or female, but masculine and feminine. So I'd love to, so I know it's kind of a two-part question, but however you want to answer it.
Okay, I want to speak to the first part of the question. So, like I was saying, the example, I can connect well with men because I'm in engineering and also have done things outside of work that are more male type of things. And what I would ask all males to do is to try to connect with women on your level as well. You all have a feminine side. You all have mothers. You all potentially have wives or girlfriends or sisters. There are women in your life, and they bring experience to your life that you can use to help connect with the women in the workplace. Sit down with them, talk to them, get to know them, because then they become a human, not just some woman in the room.
Treated fairly. I don't need to be seen as a woman or a man. I just would like to be evaluated on the work that I do. And one of the things that I thought would be interesting. So nowadays, when you get a resume, sometimes you can't tell what the sex of the person is because they have an androgynous name. I love that. We should just assign everyone a number instead of a name on the resume, and I think that would really help. Double blind.
I think what could you do? I think be open to different types of discourse. So we have pattern recognition. What do we know? What are we comfortable with? What types of dialogue are we comfortable with? A lot of times the men in the room, like, you have ways, guy talk, and I'm down for guy talk. I'm all about it. But be okay with a different type or a different paradigm of thinking. I think just being open to the dialogue. And then I love your follow-up question around, do we want to be homogenous? No, I do not want to be a man, nor do I want to be looked at like a man, nor do I want, I'm really happy to be a female. I think for me, it goes back to that first part, is just accepting that women are different and we complement one another. We don't have to be opposing or competing. I have no desire to compete with the men. Love you guys, think you're smart, love what you bring to the table, but I love what we bring to the table as well.
I think I'll just add, it's a little bit about not making assumptions about what someone's role might be just based on appearance. I'll say in my personal experience, I'll walk into a room and people will think, I'm an admin. I'm, there to take meeting notes. And it's a tough pill to swallow, especially when I spent 5 years earning my PhD. But I think it's, a small change like that, would be very helpful.
I'm going to just follow up really quickly on that. And I'm going to totally call him out. So Josh is with me on my team, and I don't know how many times we have been out. He is our product guru. I don't know how many times we've been out together where people will literally look at him and assume that he's the CEO of our company. And I love our guys because they're always like, I don't know. Why don't you ask the CEO of the company? And I'm like, yes, fist pump. But yeah, I think making those assumptions, I think that was really smart.
Excellent. I think we're at our time, but thank you, ladies, so much.
Thank you.